We're back at Lamborghini, but this time to strike a deal with them. We've all done it, right? Buy a car which makes absolutely no financial sense at all. But I guess that's what us petrol heads do. And that's exactly what I did when I spent £100,000 on this Lamborghini Murcielago, which was left abandoned for over 7 years. 7 years. We've discovered along the way that the engine was rebuilt poorly. They're literally finger tight. It was also hiding some painful bodywork underneath the wrap. What on earth? And a bunch of other questionable repairs. Look, there's literally... Oh look, there's even holes here. But this is my absolute dream car, and whether it makes sense or not, I'm determined to rebuild this Lamborghini. Bye-bye! And the fact my dad is helping me along the way makes this build that much more special. But we're gonna need some help from Lamborghini, which is why I've come in today. Okay. Lamborghini actually agreed to our little deal, and what's in this box could save me thousands. But for now, we've got an engine to deal with. Now that we timed up the engine in the last video, the computers of the car need to know that the engine's timed up, so they know when to inject fuel and when to ignite it. And the way it does that is through a cam position sensor, and this pointer thing is what communicates with the cam position sensors, which are sat here. According to the Murcielago repair manual, the pointer on the end of the cam needs to be pointing to that cam sensor when piston number 1 is 30 degrees before top dead center. So we're turning over the engine now to get it bang on 30 degrees before, then I can adjust that pointer into place and slide on the cam position sensor and see if it lines up. And it was, so that means we can tighten it all down. Everything is all timed up, ready to go. All we need to do now is literally start bolting the whole thing together, and then we can figure out whether what we've done is actually right. We are actually sealing up the engine now. On go the rocker covers, both left hand and right hand side, along with the gaskets and the gaskets for the cam sensors as well. And what I have in my hand now are some knock sensors. They bolt to the lower block of the engine and then send a signal to the ECU if any of the cylinders are knocking. So I've got to make sure I get these in the right place. Then I've got the oil filter and the oil filter housing to bolt onto it. Yes, I'm going to need a new oil filter, but we'll get to that. And with that all on, we can finally take the engine off the engine stand and hang it with the engine hoist. Now we can access the main seal of the engine and replace that. And somewhere amongst the boxes of bits, I found a starter motor that we can bolt to the engine as well. Now, when we bought the car, it didn't come with a flywheel, but I've managed to get a reconditioned flywheel and Kevlar clutch all balanced up from a company called Reeves Knights. I think I'm pronouncing that right. £2,000 for the clutch flywheel, and it's an uprated one as well. And it came with all the bolts, so absolute legend. This should go on like this. So this flywheel is actually brand new secondhand. It's been resurfaced, so it should be as good as new. There's some special plates which go on before the bolts, and then I've got to torque the bolts up in the procedure that it says in the manual. And once the bolts are torqued up, you're actually meant to knock over the plate which sits behind the bolts, which kind of clamps the bolt down and stops it from coming loose. But I can't imagine how well that works. And there it is. And there's one final thing we're missing. We've got a new bearing from the bearing shop. My dad went to the bearing shop, £5 for a new bearing. Although from Lamborghini it was £15, so we saved a tenner at least. Oh, one fresh new bearing and the circlip installed.
Oh, it's like going to the jewellers.
£2,000 worth of clutch. Isn't it?
It's good for 10 mile.
This has all been balanced, so we are making sure now that the pressure plate lines up to the flywheel like that, so then we're not going to get any wobbles. Now you're actually supposed to use a special clutch alignment tool to make sure that the clutch sits perfectly in the center of the flywheel. But as we didn't have one, we managed to make one with an extension and a socket, as I'm sure a lot of you guys who have changed clutches before at home do the same thing. Clutch and pressure plate is on, lined up, we think, and excitingly, the next step. The next step is we're going to take the manual gearbox off the stand, which actually we found out in a previous episode was an automatic gearbox, which is converted to a manual because it has an extra hole here, which we're going to have to fill up with something. And we're going to bolt it to it, and we will have like a complete engine and gearbox, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I filled it up.
Another monumental moment now. The gearbox being bolted to the engine of the car. Yeah. Now that we've slid it into place, yeah, all we've got to do is tighten up all the bell housing bolts. And there was one thing I was dying to find out. One thing that we don't know, now this is all together, is whether the starter motor even works. And anything on this car looks like we've got to take the engine out to change. So I want to be 100% sure that starter motor works. So we've got a jumper pack and a load of other goodies, which we're going to put onto the starter motor, and then we're going to ground it out over here. This is a little switch. One of these is going to go on the positive, negative for the switch. Turn this on. It's in neutral. Yeah. It's not going to try and drive. Okay, now if this should turn the whole engine over.
You've not got an earth on it.
No. Yeah?
Right, yeah, that's
right.
That's good.
Hey! It's okay, we've got assembly lube in it, so the starter motor does work, if you can listen. Too much rock. At least the starter motor works though, and the engine does turn over. There's no valve sitting pistons though, is there? So
No.
we're good. And that worked. Science. Things are looking good and we're making some really good progress already. Now it's time to start bolting on all the ancillaries of the car, like the water pump and the thermostat housing, which I'm doing now, and then both the engine mounts, left hand and right hand side of the car. And I'd say we're doing pretty well for people that have never built a Lamborghini engine before. This huge clump of metal here is the power steering pump and the aircon compressor as well. Yes, a 2002 Lamborghini does have aircon. And then one final tensioner which bolts on here. Now let me tell you about this deal that we made with Lamborghini at the start of the video. Ever since I picked up the car, the instrument cluster hasn't worked. And apparently that's because the previous owners managed to jump the car the wrong way. Now, a brand new instrument cluster from Lamborghini would cost me over £3,400, including tax. So I really wanted to avoid buying one. Also, you may remember we ordered a brand new oil pump from Lamborghini because we wasn't confident in the way that the old one had been rebuilt. But after ordering it, the wait got longer and longer. And in the end, we ended up rebuilding the one that we had. So I had a deal proposal with Lamborghini to cancel my oil pump order and transfer the money that I used to pay for that onto a new instrument cluster. Now normally they wouldn't accept this because it's a special order part, but on this occasion they did. And inside this box, finally, we have a brand new instrument cluster. After all the hassle we've had with the old one. But unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. As soon as I got back, I unboxed this instrument cluster to find that on the back, the plug, the connector in here is completely different to the plug and connector that is on my instrument cluster. Now I've double and triple checked the wiring behind my dashboard to see if anybody has messed with the plugs or changed the connector to a different one, but it all looks legit. These connectors at the bottom here look almost too good to be, well, anything else but Lamborghini, and this plug is definitely all original. And Lamborghini were 100% positive that they've sent me the right cluster. They matched it off my VIN number. So what the hell was going on? Well, I then found out this. If you check these clocks out, they read in miles per hour, and my old clocks actually read in kilometers per hour. It turns out that all 2002 Lamborghini Murcielagos were only made with clocks that read in kilometers per hour. And then all the models after 2002 came with a completely different wiring harness behind the whole dashboard. And the instrument cluster with the plug that I need are discontinued. So if you had a 2002 Lamborghini Murcielago and you wanted your instrument cluster to read in miles per hour, not kilometers per hour, you'd have to buy this. This wiring harness here, which converts it from that plug into the blue plug that is on the back of all the instrument clusters from now on. And let me show you how much they want for that instrument cluster. £1,666.40 plus VAT. So if I want this instrument cluster to work, I'm in well over, what, like £6,000. So I still don't know what to do. We've got to get the old ones working. On top of that, when we do finally get the instrument cluster working, we still have no idea what the mileage of this car would be. And the only way I can roughly find out is by checking it out using Car Vertical. This is the report I've got for the Lamborghini Murcielago. Everything all looks good throughout the report, and when you get to the mileage graph, the last recorded mileage was around 78,000 miles in 2009. So I'd say we're expecting around 80,000 miles, fingers crossed. And I know you guys hear me go on and on about Car Vertical, but it genuinely is a really good product, not only for supporting me and my channel, but also for helping all you guys as well. Here's an example of a report. I can see whether the car's been involved in any mileage discrepancies, been recorded as stolen, been in an accident, or has any outstanding finance. The report will give me so much information, including mileage records as well. And on this particular Range Rover, it's coming up as damaged. And I can even scroll down the report to see the photos of when the car got auctioned off at the car crash auction website. So please, next time you go to buy a car, check it out using Car Vertical first with the link in the description box below, and use code MATT for some discount on that check. Who knows how much money that could save you. The engine and the gearbox is absolutely huge, and all of this has got to go in as is really, because it's so difficult to work around. Even though it's a huge engine bay, when it's in, I'm sure this is going to be like completely tight and compact. And we've got to get the exhaust manifold on before we put the engine in, because the side of the engine wall there is going to be so difficult to slide anything on once that engine is in. And the exhaust manifold, well, one of them is over here. Let's say, well, this one's going to go the other side, but between the exhaust manifold and the block of the engine, there are 12 of these gaskets, one for each cylinder, and we only have one. I've just called Lamborghini. They want £333 for 12 of these gaskets, and they're just little metal materials. They can get them tomorrow. We want to put the engine in today. So the only solution we have is we're going to send Fabian to an exhaust place to get a bit of sheet metal, which we should be able to make these exhaust gaskets from. Easy. Go, Fabian. Whilst we wait for Fabian to collect and deliver the goods, we've got plenty more we can carry on with. One of them being the rear diff. This attaches directly to the engine, and we're pretty sure that we should bolt this on before we put it in the car. And after that, to drive all the ancillaries, we're going to need an ancillary belt. Lamborghini want £90 and 8 pence plus VAT for an auxiliary belt. And you can already guess we found one for a lot cheaper on eBay. £13.49p. We just gotta hope it works. And the belt fits snug. Come on. And quite positively, it did. It was pretty easy to cross-reference the auxiliary belts. We just needed to find out the length of the original belt and how many ribs it had in it. And once we put the alternator on and tightened the tensioner up, the belt was on and the engine was just about ready. Right, now everything is all on, and we've got some decision to make. My dad reckons that it would probably go in the engine a lot better without the inlet manifold on, but I think it's going to be easier to get it on now. Well, we'll see. I think let's put the inlet manifold on, and then I think we're just about ready to go, bar the exhaust manifold gaskets. And this was the inlet manifold. This is what's came off, and quite clearly, before this engine was taken apart, you can obviously see it wasn't so healthy. I mean, this side of the inlet looks like an oil sump, and there's a lot of oil stains in there, and there definitely shouldn't be any oil inside an inlet manifold. So this car would have been smoking like hell. Either way, we're going to clean it up. I'll put these on top, and then we've got these to deal with. I'm going to clean the inlet manifold up with a bit of degreaser and hopefully get rid of most of that oil staining, which definitely shouldn't be in there. Once I've done that, there's some more gaskets to go on, and then the rest of the components before I can put on both the covers of each bank of the inlet manifold. The next thing to go in on the inlet manifold are the injectors. We've got all the old ones here. Well, they're Bosch ones, and they're like 30 to 40 pound an injector, which really isn't too bad, but when there's 12 of them, it's pretty bad. Instead, I sent these off to Artec to have them cleaned out, new seals put on them, and all the pattern tested. They've got a pretty cool machine inside Artec which tests the injectors. You can actually see the spray pattern here, and they told me that before they were pretty bad, so this engine wouldn't have been the healthiest. And what they do, they put new baskets on there, clean everything all out, put new seals on them, and then retest them to make sure they are in tip-top shape. And there they are, as good as new. Much better than buying 12 new injectors at £40 each. Now I'm attaching them to the fuel rail, which they just push into place, and then they're held on with a little sliding clip. Then I'm going to push them into the inlet manifold. This is the same for both sides. And to add even more to that, there's some more weird vacuum lines which sit on the inlet manifold both sides, which open another sort of butterfly flap inside the inlet manifold. Maybe one of you guys in the comments can tell me what exactly this part does, but I wasn't too sure. Okay, looking good. The next thing to go on are the throttle bodies, each side, which open and close to let the air in the engine. And if you remember in the last video, I told you they were the same throttle bodies that are used on a Volvo. This is a Murcielago throttle body, and this is a Volvo throttle body. They are literally exactly the same. But unfortunately, there is a few issues which are going to stop us from sending these Lamborghini ones back and using the Volvo ones, and it's something to do with the coding on the car. Even though the car's a 2002 Murcielago, it still requires throttle bodies to be coded to the car if they're different. And obviously Volvo ones are going to be different. They've got a different amount of wires going into the plug, so maybe we could have got the Volvo ones working if we knew what we were doing, but the issue is we don't. And I've already spent the money now, I've committed to it. These throttle bodies are going on. And I definitely think we've cheated Lamborghini out of enough money so far. It's just annoying we couldn't save that little bit extra on these throttle bodies. But now we have just hit monumental moment number 2. The engine, the gearbox, the rear diff, and the inlet manifold are all bolted together for the first time in 7 years. And to complement that, we're now adding the wiring loom which connects to all the injectors and everything around the inlet manifold to make life a little bit easier when we put the engine into the car. The engine block, the inlet manifold, and the throttle bodies and part of the wiring loom is all connected now, looking absolutely massive. The next thing to go on is the exhaust manifold, and Fabian has delivered the exhaust gasket material, which we've got sheets of these metal. I think it was about 40 quid, and we've gone through about 4 already, and we're cutting out the template. Well, my dad's cutting out the template for the exhaust manifolds. Here's some that he's done earlier, questionable, but
There we go.
perfect. This sensor here is actually for a manifold pressure sensor. So that plugs in there, and then this hose off it, the manifold bolts onto that, like there, and then there's a line which connects into the exhaust manifold here, which we don't have. And from the looks of it, it looks like it's going to be a brake line. And actually looking at the diagram for this, it does look like just a copper line. And I've got some copper line laying around which I've used for some brakes before. So I'm now going to have a go at making my own exhaust manifold pressure wire for a Lamborghini Murcielago. The tool I'm using now sort of spurs the brake line out as it would do on a normal brake line. And you can see that here. And that should screw into the exhaust manifolds. I'm pretty sure the idea of these sensors is to detect the pressure between the manifold and the catalytic converters. If the cats were blocked, then there'd be more pressure, which would bring up a fault. And sure enough, it seems to be doing the job, but I guess we won't find out if it actually works properly until we get the engine running. And I'm so glad we're putting the exhaust manifold on now and not when it's in the car, because it was even difficult and such a tedious, long job to do whilst it was out the car. You can only get half a turn on the spanner at a time.
Boring, annoying, boring. Bored.
After I'd finally tightened up all the bolts for the manifold, I can then trim down my new manifold pressure line which I'd made. I'm not sure that's the proper way to do it, but it worked. After that, it just slides in the silicone hose which connects to the sensor, and we're just about ready to go. And looking back on it now, Lamborghini would have charged £50 for the right hand side pipe and £188.20 for the left hand pipe. So I've made quite a saving there. That's if it works. One thing I want to do before we put the engine in is drain the rear diff oil, as I imagine it's not been changed in such a long time, and fill it up with some fresh 75 W90. There's two plugs on the rear diff, one being a drain plug and one being the fill plug. And all you do to fill it is just keep putting the 75 W90 in until it starts coming back out the fill plug. And it's exactly the same for the gearbox. Apart from the gearbox takes a lot more oil than the rear diff. This is it. The moment we've been waiting for since picking up this engine and rebuilding it. Putting it in the car. It's going to be one small lift for man and one giant leap for mankind. Welcome to monumental moment number 3. The V12 Murcielago engine is about to be one with the car again after 7 years of being apart. Rebuilt by Armstrong and Son, with no experience with Lamborghini engines before. I really hope that this is gonna work. Because of the size of the engine and the gearbox, we have to put this in a really strange way. We're lifting it up with the 2-post ramp and then pulling the car towards the engine. After that, the gearbox has to slide down the transmission tunnel, which means that we have to angle the engine at such a strange angle. And then together, we're going to slowly guide it into place to sit on the 2 lower engine mounts. So close to getting the engine mounts in. So close. We just need a spacer on top of them. I think that's what Lamborghini do. Then we can get the bolt through. Yes! Yes! Oh my god, it's in. What a car. The engine is in the Lamborghini Murcielago. Come on. One milestone here. If you want to be the first to turn the key on the Lamborghini Murcielago, you've got to go and grab a Save the Manual hoodie, which my dad is wearing at the back over there. And you can be the first to turn the key. Go grab one, because in the next episode, you might be turning the key. Thanks so much for watching this video. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
That does not look right.
Why couldn't we have worked on it like that the whole time?